Broadcasting live from the Phoenix Business Radio X studio in Tempe, Arizona. You are tuning in to Culture Crush with Kendra Maples. This podcast will dive into a variety of companies that are crushing it with a great company culture.
Welcome to another episode of Culture Crush Business Podcast. As a growing company, we are the culture improvement resource that supports companies and leaders. Our mission is to improve company cultures so that people want to go to work. Employees and leaders should like where they work, and we truly believe that this is possible. Culture Crush has vetted resources and partnerships with the right people that can help improve your company culture. On this podcast, we focus on everything surrounding businesses with a good company culture. We deep dive into companies that are crushing it with that great company culture. And today is no different. I am super excited to have you guys. I say that every time, but I'm really excited because I've been fangirling about today. The company that we have to highlight on the show today is Arizona Wilderness Brewing Company. We tend to match a company with a resource. And today we just decided we're just focusing on you guys. We're just going to have you guys. So today we have Jonathan Buford, the founder, Patrick Ware, the owner and head of brewing operations, and Johanna Lorcher, head of people and culture. I love that title, by the way.
Thank you.
She has a cooler title than you guys.
That shit. Yeah.
So welcome. I'm so excited to have you guys. Like I said, I was pretty stoked, and Daryl, our producer, knows that I was fangirling about this because it's.
Is that why Daryl gave us some weird looks?
He knows I was so excited because it's different when you're highlighting companies, and we highlight companies globally. So we've had companies from Canada on the show. We have some upcoming companies from Australia coming on the show. So it's great to learn about different companies and what they're doing to improve company culture. But it's different when it's a place that you go to and that you frequent with your family often, right? And that you don't have to look at the menu because you know exactly what burger and exactly what drink you're going to get. So with that being said, I'm super stoked to have you guys on the show today. So thank you.
Thanks
for having us. Yeah, it's exciting.
Exciting day for us,
right?
To talk culture.
I know.
Yeah.
And especially because for you guys with your industry, and maybe you tell me if I'm wrong, but is culture something that tends to be a focus in restaurants and breweries and things like that?
I'm glad you identified that there are two different cultures in our company. The brewery culture certainly is different than the restaurant culture. Craft beer kind of took off in 2005. It wasn't until 1983 that Sierra Nevada got going. It wasn't until 1988 that there was a little boom. I'm talking 12 breweries. It wasn't until 96 that we saw a really major boom of 400 breweries. Now we're sitting at 9,000, over 9,000. Restaurants have been around a lot longer now. So you have two side-by-side cultures that we've combined into one. And, seeing those as separate cultures is something we have identified as, okay, brewers are going to act a little different. Mm-hmm. They're a smaller, more tight-knit group. Restaurant people have probably been in this industry for a while, and they have expectations. So yeah, that's a big part of what we do here is see those two and try to combine them all.
Yeah. What a unique mix that you're working with. And I want to read just a quick description. Whenever we get the information of the companies, we always want to know, like, what do you guys want us to say about you? And I want to read this only because it really shows that you guys are more than a restaurant, more than a brewery, right? So the snippet that you guys sent over was Arizona Wilderness is a company born out of the love for the great state of Arizona. Arizona Wilderness uses craft beer-inspired food fare and community-driven atmosphere to act as the conduit between its consumer and the great outdoors. Arizona Wilderness focus on sustainability, conservation, and community is what they believe to be the new way to operate a business in the new Arizona. I loved reading that because it's not like, hey, we're a restaurant and we have cool beer. Like, it's so much further than that, so much greater than that. And it just the focus on conservation and local. We love when we go to your Gilbert location because it shows all of the stuff that's local, that's right here in Arizona. So can any of you just elaborate on that? Like, how did you guys get started, and how did you start with this focus on community and local and, having everything really focused on Arizona?
Take it back to the beginning, Jon.
Yeah. I'm glad you're wearing that shirt, which I really appreciate. It actually is the outline of the National Forest sign that I would have seen and said, "Welcome to the wilderness." And I got to that sign and said, there's something so special about this imaginary line that we all understand that it's important to protect past this point.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of ingrained in our spirit. Even if people don't care about it, they tend to understand what we're talking about when we say wilderness. But that sign was a clear designation of, wow, past this point, we've protected this to be unkempt by humankind. So I had that kind of nagging itch when I first saw, like, what is it about this that I love so much? Coinciding with my photography career, that was kind of, passionate hobby at the time, still is. I wanted to show people those moments that I was seeing, but craft beer was popping up more and more and more in society, in small. What I love about craft beer is it's not about the big city. It was rural areas. Chandler wasn't quite the city it is today yet, even just 10 years ago. Gilbert didn't have a brewery, didn't have any major bar. And, we're talking 10 years ago. So, you could, in some cities, you have to go back 100 years to say this. So there was those two things that came together of, like, my love of craft beer that's just starting, 2008, 9, and 10 and just booming, and love of Arizona kind of collided on a mountain. The impetus of that started up there somewhere above 9,000 feet going, wow, I'd love to have this theme. And as I progressed, I realized when you're talking about good ideas, you got to talk about doing them. Mm-hmm. And that's where Patrick came in. Coincidentally, a lot of people thought I looked like him, and I'd get a, "Hey,
still
Pat."
do, Jon.
Yeah,
I still look like brothers.
"Hey, Pat." I'm like, "Nope," and he'd get, "Hey, Jon," because I was doing a Kickstarter. I was the second brewery to do a Kickstarter.
Okay,
and a lot of people picked up on that quickly, which I'm very lucky for, and they said, "Hey," to him, "Hey, you're doing Kickstarter." He's like, "Who is this guy?" So finally, we had to meet. And
they were saying this before you even met.
Yeah.
Oh, how funny.
Because he was
he had started the company already.
Okay.
And I was brewing down the road.
You're like, who's this guy that people think I am?
I trudged forward into this business before I put the cart before the horse, but that's my nature. And Patrick had been working at a brewery down the road called Santan Brewing Company, and it just lined up where we met. And it was like, hey, you've already done the things that I wanted to do, which was start this trudge forward. I call it a trudge because it is in the beginning. And I said, you're doing the things that I wanted to do, which is know how to brew beer and build that company culture. And so that's where we forged that relationship. Lo and behold, 10 years later, it's a restaurant group with a brewery. And Pat's turning that into, we're a brewery with a restaurant attached. We're kind of going back on our brewery roots. So we learned a great deal of cultural lessons along the way, but that's the start of it, really, the love of Arizona and the love of beer.
Okay. Nice. And then as you're starting all of this, from the very beginning, as you're trudging, did you already know, like, okay, we're going to make this stuff local, everything's going to be here? Like, how did that tie in?
One thing I'm very proud of is that Kickstarter video, which, no one wants to see their Kickstarter video 10 years later.
I'm going to find it.
Yeah, that was adorable. I want to pinch my cheeks and go, you're going to do it. But I did stay consistent with what we are doing today. Sometimes I second guess myself going, how did we get here? Like, all these big claims that where did I think that in the beginning? You just don't remember. But in the Kickstarter video, it's solidified where I really say I want to be a conduit to the community, probably because of my Midwestern roots. Grew up in Pennsylvania and Ohio, where a farm was very normal to drive by every day. The smell of Queen Creek, well, that was the smell of Ohio. Those cows and the corn and all that. So I started to get rather annoyed that people viewed us as the saguaro with the buzzard and the sun, the buzzard going around the saguaro. And it just kind of started to get to me. So that's part of my push of the local, like, hey, let's turn people's head around. now in hindsight, it's definitely not what I feel. I don't want everyone just showing up here to move here. I think you should come here and have to act a certain way if you're going to be in the desiccated Southwest. But I think it was part of our roots because of my Midwestern roots. And then Patrick, he was inspired by it because he's like, I grew up in Ahwatukee, so I'll let him take it from here. But, I didn't think this way is what he basically told me. And we learned together of how the state needs companies like this.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so you grew up in Ahwatukee.
I did. Yeah.
Even though none of you guys were born in Arizona,
cul-de-sac.
which I just found out, which is fun.
That's right.
Okay, so born in Ahwatukee, and then you're getting started, you're getting involved with this, and then you knew that you wanted it to be local and be present and all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I was drawn to the ethos, and it was actually a backpacking trip that Jon took me on, and we got into that deep nostalgia we've been talking about.
It was bromantic.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, he pulled my heartstrings with that. We went down West Clear Creek, and I think at the time I had like a JanSport backpack and no sleeping bag. And I thought, oh yeah, this is going to be whatever. It's
oddly like how we were starting a business.
yeah. On a shoestring and just like duct tape and gum, MacGyver every moment. But it was so exciting because Jon would show up and say, hey, I got this guy's local coffee, and I was window cleaning his garage and local company, and we're going to use this. And I was like, wow, that's so cool. Okay, what else could we do? And then we started to understand that breweries had foraged items, mindfully from various areas of the country. And just digging into the layers of Arizona was mind-blowing. It's like, well, we grow a lot of pecans here. We grow a lot of pistachios here. We actually grow blackberries and Sonora white wheat. And it just went on and on. And so the possibilities were endless. And we just went after every single shiny object that we saw. And then that led us to essentially win the #1 new brewery in the world award, which was based on an algorithm that was breadth of style and the height of those ratings of those beers. And with what the ethos Jon had placed in front of me and what I was able to do with some of those recipes and just developing the beer to taste good. I wouldn't say at the beginning we were great by any means, but we had this, what's called freshness in the beer world. We had this, like, people were coming at high rates and the beer was being drank very quickly. So if there were any flaws in the beer, they weren't really going to develop because we made it and it was gone. We made it and it was gone, So we had a really good business model to start. And then we realized we had to run a restaurant. And that's where things went a little sideways. And we went, oh my God, we need to figure out how to run a kitchen where there are literally fires popping up on the grill that we're running back and throwing, what was it, salt? You throw salt on the fire?
Yeah, don't put water on the fire.
Oh yeah, I learned that one time the wrong way.
Yeah, don't create a grease fire. That's a problem.
Yeah.
So after that rating, our first 6 months of open, which was very unique because we were at a point where during the build out, we had run out of money. I was sleeping on Jon's couch part-time.
He sold his car to stay afloat.
Jon had taken his wife's 401k to like
foreclosures and all those things were looming.
It was a little hairy.
It was not what it is today. I'll just put it to you that way. Like, a lot of people see success and we're holding it together, but it was painstaking because I was unprepared. I owned a window cleaning business and I was out of the garage as well. And that was, kind of I was alone. I had a couple employees here and there, but I was alone. Then to bring in someone like Patrick and you start to see, wow, he gave up his career. He's got to sell his car. He's got to adapt to everything that I'm doing. And if I make mistakes, he has to now go through them. And he's our first employee. So that was the first step of culture for us, is seeing what Pat had to sacrifice was like, wow, I wouldn't have anticipated the sleeping on my couch and, but that's what it's like when you're not prepared as a business to take on employees and treat them with respect and want them to come to work is a big part of it.
And also the expectation that they're going to be as bought in to the cause as you are and willing to sacrifice everything. And, John being like an older brother at the time was like, well, we can do it. There's no limits here. So let's run through that wall that's in our way. And I believe that as well. So that's where our kinship aligned was, let's go run through these walls.
If we only had Johanna back then.
Hey, maybe slow down, guys.
You just go around the wall.
I know. She's like, why is there a wall?
Joe's just as crazy as us. So that's what I love about it. But
Right.
it would have been interesting to be like, hey, consider what an employee will see when they come in when you're up in the roof and something's exploding.
Yeah. We had this old brew system that, I mean, it was modified dairy equipment that was kind of partially
I bought it with Kickstarter money, and it was, 43,000 sounds like a lot, but breweries are 500 to $1 million easily, small ones. And so I went to Billings, Montana in a severe blizzard and drove it home through Yellowstone.
Oh God.
And it's a budget rental truck, and like my whole life is right there behind me, and I'm in Yellowstone on a little backpacking tour. That's very me. If I can get some fun out of it. And I drove it back home, and Pat looks at it. I remember him climbing into what's called the mash tun, a major piece of equipment on the brewing side. And he climbed in. He's like, oh, man, this is going to be interesting. Yeah. You bought old dairy equipment that's just going to have to work. And that was like the first time Pat showed me, like, I'll just get it done. And that culture is great day one, but it's not great year 10. It's not like just get it done, and sacrifice isn't what I'd recommend now.
But you need that, in your roots, because it starts you two from the very beginning, very connected, sleeping on his couch, it puts you guys truly trudging, right?
Yeah.
From the very beginning. So then walk me through, I know we only have an hour. That's so much to walk through. So you mentioned that's where the culture begins, right? So walk me through what that looks like from the two of you, right? This culture is very much starting with trust, hard work, let's get shit done, that kind of mentality. And then fast forward, now you have Johanna, and now you've only been here 6 months, 7 months,
Yeah,
something
6-7
like
months,
that.
yeah.
Okay.
You mean 6 years, right?
It feels like it.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Like
in a
you've always
positive
been
way.
here.
Like she's part of the family for sure.
Yeah. So then, walk me to this point where the two of you bring her in because you know that you need to, right?
Yeah, I think
We
going
both
from
side there because there's a lot to say.
Yeah.
20 employees to 180,
Oh, jeez.
it's quite a difference,
Yeah.
You can't exactly just show up and everyone, hey, let's have an all-staff meeting or let's grab a beer, and everyone's in the know. Like, you need conduits for all of those communications to everybody, and you need like structure in place to have employees feel heard and for them to feel as though they have a path for their life, right? If they want this as a career, or maybe they don't, maybe they want as a part-time gig, or all of the various facets of it. And like you were alluding to before, there's multiple different cultures. Now with the size of our company, we have a brand manager and marketing side, which is more office oriented, and CFO and those types of people. And then you also have 2 kitchen staffs where it's 50 people that live the kitchen life, and the kitchen life is quite different than the front of house
kitchen
life.
life.
And those are some of the hardest working individuals in our company. And then the brewery, which is like half of it's just manual labor, lifting things and, getting it done. And then front of house, like they got to sell it, and they got to deal with the general public and like live the ethos and essentially kind of be brand ambassadors as they walk the floor. And so that's pretty complex.
Yeah. To get to your question directly, how we got from 0 to 60, which is basically 10 years. We are 8.5 years old as far as the day we opened, but you know how the culture starts when the founder decides, I'm going to go forward with this. What's unique is I wasn't a great business owner. There's so many mistakes that I didn't know I was making. Someone like Johanna makes it clear that's okay. That's one thing you got to let go is you did your best, but we're here now. And in COVID was probably the biggest cultural revolution since the 60s, in my opinion. It was a reflection on self It was a reflection on society. And some people found flaws where there wasn't a flaw before. And so what's so unique about Johanna's entrance to the company was we saw this in a light because of our love of Patagonia, the clothing company. We started to read what they were saying, and several other companies too, but we started to see, to get through a great recession, culture will always push you through. Companies' cultures will put you through the hardest of times and
What's
the best of
the
times.
saying? Culture eats strategy for breakfast.
And
Peter Buck.
we started to see this in COVID a little brighter than before, because we noticed that employees were speaking differently to us, and we felt differently. There hasn't been a 10 years of I want to own this business in my mind. There's been some shaky moments where it's like, oh, this is a lot. But what we didn't have is the unifying master of their craft when it comes to culture. And so we started to put together this pretty in-depth interview process, as Johanna's made me aware. But, when you're protecting your nest, you're going to ask some hard questions and maybe off-the-wall questions. But out of the 280 applicants for this head of people and culture, there was no question that Joe fit. It was like...
They were looking for me.
Yeah. It was...
They didn't know
I
it,
think
but
so,
they were
yeah.
totally looking for me.
Love it.
Yeah,
it
I
was
think-
love at first sight when it comes to business culture. We were like, this is the person. We definitely lean female on the culture side because we were bearded white males. And we wanted to make sure that we broke up. And when we say diversity, you can't say diversity and then be bearded white, inviting bearded white, talking
Well,
bearded
yeah,
white.
you can't have a monoculture, specifically at the top of the company. Like you need other voices.
Yeah.
And part of that process through understanding culture through Patagonia and some of these Netflix and things of that nature, we were led to the B Corp. And we applied to become B Corp.
Okay.
Are you aware of B Corp?
So I was going to ask for our listeners, explain that. What does that mean?
Pat's so good at this.
So essentially,
and just to get preface, just because I think we're leaving a big part is, this is all again during COVID. So when any company out there thinks that their quote unquote millennials are acting, or Gen Z is acting like selfish because COVID. No, owners did it too. We did it too. We started to self-reflect, led us to B Corp, then said, we don't have someone at the head of our HR, so B Corp is Pat. Pat, take that one, because that's
and that was the time frame. Was COVID hit, we start to introspect. We're looking a little deeper into ourselves and understanding that we do have some flaws in our culture, and through that B Corp assessment, we scored pretty low on the people portion of it. To background, B Corp, it's a third-party certification that essentially audits your company, and you have to put people and planet over profit. Profit still being in there. Obviously, you need profitability to be a company, but you want to focus on. And for us, it was pretty easy to say, well, we're already doing this.
Yeah.
Most of these things we're already doing. We had made the switch to Sinagua
But
Malt.
people think B Corp is conservation for the most part. What we were blown away with was the first chapter of the B Corp book, which was written by...
Well, that was a revision. So
Yes.
they did add that.
Yeah. I cannot remember her name. Not Brene Brown, but someone along that lines of a cultural warrior. It essentially started talking about equality and equity. DEI. And we're like,
the DEI.
and not that it took me back because I don't think that way, but it was more or less like, where's the conservation part? And the first section was written by a Black woman who is talking about, if you want to be B Corp, you're going to have to hit this. And I'll admit, we pass that around to some of our leaders in the company, and they're doing the same thing. Like, where's the part that we're good at?
Yeah, we're good at this other
So
section.
B Corp turned us into a let's rethink what we're doing here. Because how can you talk about conservation if it's only white people and it's only Scottsdale and it's only hashtagging? You know? How can you do that? How can you get buy-in from the community? So that's where the B Corp thing. I ran at it pretty hard, as I do. I maximize. Pat tells me, well, Pat got news.
Well, so yeah, and I think that I started slowly doing my meticulous thing where I'm like, we're going to do this process and it's going to take some time. And initially John's like, what is this? Why are we doing this? And then he went, oh, this is what we're going to do.
Magic.
Let's tell the world. Let's go do it. And I was like, wait a second, this is going to be 2 years. We're still in the queue.
Okay.
And
Well,
that's
the
2 years ago.
statistic that I think is so important to say is B Corp started by the two guys who owned And One Clothing, which is very unique to go back and find out And One was this amazing company that people want to work for. But B Labs is what they started, this third party to get B Corp. This third party, not government related, not tax, not benefit corp. That would be the tax version of this.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted companies to do exactly what we're doing, to like look at themselves. And so they got, before COVID, 3,000 companies in that range, right?
Yeah.
Worldwide. During COVID, they got 3,500 companies applying. So think about what COVID did to company culture.
Mm-hmm.
You had a moment. If you're smart, and I'm saying that, you know if you're smart or not when it comes to if you're surviving today as a company, you're probably smart because it's hard to survive right now. You probably made some intelligent moves and you have smart people around you. You saw that the way the employees were talking wasn't selfish. It was the way of the future. I want to have fulfillment in my job. I want you to live up to what you're saying. If you're saying you're green, I want to know you're green. So I'm so glad that he brought us B Corp because all of a sudden, there's the B Corp handbook turned me into a cheerleader for B Corp worldwide. I could probably sell to any company right now based on that book alone because of that. Incredible. It was the first time I heard non-binary for the real like first time. Like I heard this. They explained that the pronouns and things like that, why it matters to people to feel heard, you know, and you're like, this is B Corp, you know? And so, yeah, I sold it to the company pretty hard internally. And then we had some, you know, people of different backgrounds kind of question, like, what's going on here? Then Pat got the email saying it's 3 years out. Another unique thing about company culture is, you know, from the top, you better know what you're doing. And that day, I should have held this in. We should have slow rolled this B Corp thing because it's a lot to handle.
Yeah.
Some companies who don't think this way are going to read that book and go, nope, not for me.
And then through the B Labs, that led me to this head of people job description, which was so fascinating. I've never heard of that. And then this realization, we had talked about it for a while, but it was interesting because you, as a company, bring in HR and analytically, black and white, that's just going on your bottom line. Theoretically, there's no way to quantify whether or not that's going to be profitable for you. Is that something worthy of investment? What size do you need to be to do that? Or can you just handle what's going on when things flare up? And I was a firm believer that reading some of these books, like you take your rate of attrition down, you do some of these things, it all washes out. It makes sense. You want to keep people, you want just general happiness. And then that led us to Johanna, which Joe has changed the face of who we are for the better within a very short time period. And you came on during a little bit of a tumultuous time with mask mandates. You know, she was a lot was put on her plate.
Our newsletter wasn't as fun back then.
And with the restaurant industry and
right.
Oh, geez.
Well, and there's been a cultural sweep in the craft beer industry and restaurant, and part of it is the restaurant industry and the beer industry is kind of a petri dish for some of the things that have happened in the workplace that are not positive.
And it's also at a certain age where you stop and you say, okay, what's happened so far? That some of that wasn't good. So
I mean, exactly. Some of the feedback I've gotten from former employees where you sucked as an owner, they're dead on. I didn't know it at the time though. I thought I was doing what everyone should be doing, pushing. And now I know. So some of it's like, hey, can I get a little forgiveness here? I don't think that, but there wasn't always forgiveness in the moment. And so culture is unique because it's not about your lowest level employees. It's not about your highest level employees. It's about everybody. It's about every single person. What Joe is doing is
treating everyone as a human, right?
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, maybe you can elaborate on that.
Yeah,
Joe.
what she's doing is making sure every single person has access to say what they feel. And that's a big deal.
Yeah.
And not everybody's going to use it. Not everybody cares. But it's the same with our mission and our values. Every employee in the company should have access to that information. They should understand the information. They may not be bought in. You know, not every line cook, not every pack tech is going to feel in their heart that conservation is their real passion. But they should know what it is, and they should understand why we care so much. And they should have an avenue to have their voice heard. So that's what we're working on right now.
So then what does that look like when you came in, right? You two are going through all this stuff with the B Corp and everything. You find this job description, you put it out in the universe, you find Joe.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Then you show up. What does all of that look like? How do you even step into that role and tackle this as head of people and culture?
So the first step, of course, is the listening, because there is so many months and months of just listening and asking questions and trying to find the right questions to ask and finding out where people are at. And I am probably still in that portion of the game, is, going to all the meetings and reading all of the things that are available, all the managers' logs and everything, to really understand how this company runs and to what the people are, what their feelings are. And so then we are working on creating a systematic way of interacting with employees from the beginning of their employment, from the recruiting process through the onboarding, through performance evaluations and all of the different trainings, and even through the termination process, the end of people's employment, to have that all be a cohesive whole that reflects our culture and our values. And it's going to take a couple years before we fully get there, and some turnover will probably happen. I mean, it's the restaurant industry. It's a churn and burn kind of an industry. So turnover will definitely happen, and you'll have to start all over again. But that's the goal. There is to have that cohesive cultural component where everybody knows from the get-go why they're working at Wilderness and what we mean.
And I'm so glad. One of the things that you just mentioned was it's that, systematic process from essentially start to finish, right? There's a whole life cycle with somebody working with you guys. And that's a huge part of your life, is when you're working somewhere, right? So Jon, like you said, you want to work somewhere where you feel heard, you feel part of it. But the part that I picked up on right now is, you said, even through termination. That is the piece. And Daryl, our producer, has been in this room with me for a lot of conversations. And even the companies that are doing a great job with culture, they miss that piece. But a couple of months ago, we had Rick West on from a company called Field Agent. He really emphasized that when they leave, right, whether it's their choice or the company's choice or whatever, that's a huge piece in the company culture, because that process can go and be positive, and then they become an advocate for you guys, and then they still root for you, and they still are connected to the conservation and to, everything being local, and they still want to bring their families there to eat and drink. Or that step in the process of culture building can go wrong.
Yeah.
And that's when you have, people leave and they're angry and they're pissed. And, even if the whole time they worked for you, it was great. And, they leave, and the leaders kind of do this out of sight, out of mind, that's where I have seen companies kind of miss the mark. And so I'm so glad that you list that in that whole process, because Rick was mentioning he's had a handful of people and employees that have left on their own decision, right? They wanted to try something new or grow somewhere or get experience somewhere. And they've come back, and he's welcomed them back.
Nice.
And he said, we've had some people leave a couple times and come back a couple times. I'm like, how many times do you, right? Right.
And, that sounds familiar.
But then it shows something about you guys, that maybe they needed to leave, test the water somewhere else for a little bit, gain a new, skill set. And then they go, man, that place was really good. And then they come back. And so I love that you touched on that. Do you have anything about like that process already that you're thinking, okay, I want to implement this, or that you've already implemented in that whole process?
I do. I'm not sure if it's articulatable. Is that
Yeah.
If I'm able to articulate it now. I mean, I do some recent events. I mean, I think on a certain level, we do a good job with it.
Yeah.
But again, in the restaurant, the turnover is very high, and it happens every week. We lose 2 people a week. It's just, that's how restaurants operate.
And that's just natural restaurant.
Right.
business.
And not everybody wants to be a server forever, right? Not everybody, a line cook is not their goal in life. It's something that they're doing for right now. And that's great. Like, we want to support that and we want to honor that. So there are ways that we could improve that part of the process for sure. And the communication that happens. But I think everybody that we work with, their heart is totally in the right place. Like, I think our managers and our head of restaurant operations, like, they're just like the best people, and their hearts are so big, and they really want to make sure that everybody feels heard and supported. They just don't have the tools. So,
we have such amazing people.
Yeah, such amazing people.
To know how to, there's so much to say about culture. I can't even articulate it because it's just like this swirling storm all the time but to calm that storm, one thing that's unique is I always derive everything from nature in my mind is how can I compare that to natural things? Because nature is the ultimate system. It's why Earth has survived for billions of years. And if you look at a tree and you say, wow, that tree is strong. It has taken root. It took 50 years to get to that, or 20 years, depending on the tree. And so that's the thing is we're still, 10 years in, we're still taking root. There's been storms, and you got to replant. Like that's how I view culture is you're trying to build this strength model with roots deep in the ground. Storms come and you got to weather them. And if you don't, you got to start over. And we did have to start over. And Joe got her shovel day one and said, it's time to dig. And this isn't going to be this like race to the finish at all. It'll technically never end. This idea of read and react culture. It's just never going to end.
Never. No.
But right now it's like, we got the seed in. I did my job there, and it's growing. But I think the leaving process doesn't mean that we're divorcing you. It's not a breakup. It's we want to learn from you what your experience was, so you can go enjoy the next process for yourself. And that learning is something that Joe has brought a lot to the table. On their way out, they said these 25 things, but these are the relevant ones that you should hear. I didn't like our break area or whatever that may be. I didn't think that you guys explained this well. Thank you for that. Then we get to put that in the system. If you lose that part of the process and it feels like a breakup, you're going to go through emotional roller coasters constantly, which I did. Felt like breakups every single time. Like your girlfriend called you or something, or a boyfriend called you and said, I don't love you anymore. And that's what it felt like. And now it's like, hey, I'm just going to move on. I want to try something else. And here's some feedback for you. So that's highly recommended on the out process.
Yep. Well, and like you said, it's this whole thing is a never ending process. Culture in itself is a never ending process, and it evolves, and there's different components. I mean, you guys, your culture is so unique in itself because, like we said, you've got the brewery side, you've got the restaurant side, but then you do have that side of house with the CFO and more of that in-office side.
And each of the restaurants is different, like because the Gilbert location, it's different than the downtown location because the model is different, the people are different, so they feel completely different.
Yeah, the customers are different.
The customers are
Downtown
different.
is the breakfast club, and Gilbert's like 16 candles.
Oh, funny. I can see that. So then what does that look like? Even just, having these two locations and you need them to all kind of not necessarily connect, but still, right? They do want to connect. They do want to feel like that communication is open.
I can tell you what not to do.
I think we're
Don't have a 1-800 rent HR for when you have culture that's separate. You need in-house for sure. You need someone who goes and sees the physical, actual things happening where, hey, call this person 1099 employee that cares a little bit. What happens over time is that person finds the easiest way out of culture. And Joe...
Or they don't see it at all. I mean, I come from a consulting background. So, and I was always happy to pick up the phone and talk to anybody, but I'm not there.
Yeah.
I'm not
what it's like to be a kitchen person is just impossible to explain.
Are they going to call HR? Or are they going to go directly to their manager?
Yeah.
Right? They don't have an advocate that is an in-house person that they know that they see face to face.
Yeah.
They're going to go to the person closest to them and complain or voice their concern and try to...
Or worse, just complain to each other and never bring it to anybody's
It's just
attention
like
and then just have it fester.
Yeah.
That's her pet peeve, just complaining.
It's a horrible thing. And sometimes you need like that 10-second moment,
You need to vent,
right?
for sure.
You need to be like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, screw this. This is what happened. And then you got to brush it off and then you move on.
Yeah.
Or
Or
if
you
it-
bring solutions.
Yeah. If it's something that is really meaty and maybe there is a bigger issue, then you bring some solutions. You take it to the right person. So now that you've already been there for a little while, is there maybe a better process for that? So say you do have that, line cook that's like, has this one thing that's just getting at them, right? And so that they don't just bitch at everybody else in the kitchen. Have you kind of added some of that?
Multiple options.
lot.
Awesome.
We have opened many lines of communication. So we have me,
Mhm.
and I have a weekly newsletter that I send out, and everybody has my email address and my hot schedules, which is our messaging app. People can contact me that way. We also have the Not Me app. Are you familiar with this?
No.
It's
What does that
#Not
do?
Me. It's a free for employees to download, and then they can communicate anonymously about microaggressions, uncomfortable work environment, safety complaints. It's a very rich, interactive app where I could have an anonymous conversation with an employee, so they never would have to if they're not comfortable saying who they are, what department they work in, they can have a completely anonymous conversation with me about it.
How cool is that? And then what happens when you have this anonymous conversation through this app? Does the app do anything, or then what do you do on your end?
Well, so if somebody lodges a complaint through the app, I get a notification, and so I would review. We haven't had any yet, but it's available to all employees. So, but I would be able to go and view the complaint and to see at that point if it's best to go to the general manager or whoever is their department manager, head brewer, or depending on what the complaint would be. I could have the option to go to their highest supervisor and work it with them to address the issue, or if it was about them or it needed to be more discreet than that, then I could have a conversation with the employee. Because sometimes you get an anonymous complaint, and if you don't have access to follow-up information, there's not too much you can do about it. Like somebody will just say, I'm annoyed by this. And you'll be like, okay, but more, please.
But
More,
how
please.
do I help you?
Yeah. So to be able to have the interaction, to me, was sort of an essential part of signing up for this.
Notice the difference of head of people than just HR.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's inside of this petri dish. She's not outside going, well, just do this and apply this and fill this paperwork out.
Yeah.
And that's a big difference for Wilderness today.
Yeah.
Yep.
And additionally, some employees in our company have started their own meeting called Cultural Conversations, where they have a meeting that's employees only, no managers.
No owners.
No owners. And it's a place for employees to voice their concerns and to work out ways in which they can take responsibility for improving the culture at our company. So they can take their complaints about their managers or the customers or the processes or new policies or whatever it may be. They can go to this safe space meeting basically and say, these are all my complaints, and everybody can say, oh yeah, I feel that way too. Or maybe think about it from this other perspective, because you're coming at it from looking at it as a host, and I'm coming at it looking at it as a server, and we have different sides. So, or maybe there's a different way you could have responded that would have improved the situation. So it helps employees see their place in the culture, and that it's not just something that's happening to them, but it's something that they're creating. So it helps give them a voice and a way to speak up and to confidently say, no, this is what I want in my company.
What a cool idea. So I'm curious, did that come from employees as an idea?
So we there's a women in brewing called Pink Boots. So me and some of the female brewers and some of the other women on our team had gone to a Pink Boots safe space meeting, and one of our female brewers was like, "This, I want to do this. I want to do this in our company, and I think this would be great." And I was like, "Yeah, let's do it." So she's completely taken the wheel, and I'm just sort of like clearing the path for her.
Yeah, all of our
happen.
beer is made by, led by someone named Ashley, and she leads a group of 8 brewers, and so we're 33% of our brew staff happens to identify as female. And it's like, not that that's complicated for us. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that is not typical.
It's unusual for the
I was
industry.
going to
for
say
sure.
that's awesome though.
And I think it's good for men to see this too. Like we are communicative beings. It's the only reason we made it this far. As humans, it's not because we're good with bow and arrows. It's not that. It's not good because we invented the gun. It's because we communicate. That's why we took down the Neanderthal. We were able to communicate.
Groups of over 100. We were able to communicate.
And that's still here today. And so I think it's good for men to see the same, the masculine side of your company, to see like, oh, talking and stopping and thinking is A-okay.
Yes.
And so I'll admit something that this group didn't go over. There were some questions. So we're going to have this group of people meeting to talk about these cultural things on their own. And some people had some questions about that, I think, and they identified those questions and wanted Pat and I specifically to hear the concern. Again, a great form of communication. That means it's working. If there's questions, let's talk. And at the end of that, I think the leaders said, oh, this is, pun intended, safe. It's a safe place that's also safe for us. It's just communication. And if you go back to the worst company cultures, the first thing you unveil is there's bad communication.
Absolutely.
No one heard anything. No one was allowed to say anything. So Johanna's brought this, the soil is getting richer for the roots to grow deeper. That's what she's brought in.
And I love that it came from employees. So now with this culture conversation, are there any moments where maybe that group does discuss something and then they figure out, okay, this really is something that needs to leave the room and be brought to, the attention of maybe the three of you?
Yeah.
Pat, this is why we have Johanna, because that's a complicated.
It is.
Yeah. So
I'm glad Joe's here for that.
the women who are sort of leading this, they afterwards will bring me a list of actionable items.
Okay.
So anything that they view as actionable or answers that they're looking for. And I think they are really trying to acknowledge that there are multiple sides to each issue, and that when people bring forth complaints from the front of the house or the back of the house, that there's another side that they don't see. And so it's incredibly helpful for the side that we don't see to see that, and for them to see the side that they don't see. So it really is like, okay, here's a list of concerns that we have. And I'll say, all right, here's the ways in which we can help address those. But here's some other things that you need to understand that you're not, like a portion of that you're not fully aware of. So you got to see the whole, not just the front part of the moon, the whole side of the moon.
It's
Absolutely.
so helpful for us too. We never had the insight like this before. And so something would happen and someone would leave and they'd be upset. And like Jon said, it's this horrible breakup scenario. We were hearing about it post-mortem. Oh, really? They were upset? They're gone? They're telling people we have a terrible company? Okay, we didn't know about it.
Right? They didn't even give you the opportunity.
So, and even if it is something that's a little frivolous, if it comes through the anonymous surveys that we do, and we can read through those comments, and some of them are like...
Oh yeah, we also do anonymous surveys.
It's like some of them, they're not realistic.
Yeah.
It's like Jon and I aren't going to be in there washing dishes 10 hours a week to like, just to
know what
be
a
with
dishwasher
everybody,
feels like. Yeah,
like we did that, we definitely did that stuff. So, but it's good to know all the information and like get the information to us so we can think about it.
Yep. And then both ways, right? That communication. So if something does come through that group, that conversation, it's not just becoming that bitch fest, right?
Yeah.
Of like, oh, Jon does not do dishes. And you're like, okay, listen up, kid. This is what I went through. Pat was sleeping on my couch. It allows that conversation. So it doesn't turn into that, that there's just a group that wants to argue with each other and bitch shit about what's going on. It gives you the opportunity, Johanna, to come back and be like, hey, here's the backside of this. Here's the why.
And we've also put a lot of trust in the employees that are leading this, that they can say, all right, that's enough venting. Let's move to a solution-based conversation. And so, before, when we were working out the details of the meeting, I made sure to check and make sure that was on their minds, and it 100% was. They were already like, and any tips you can give us on how to make sure we're not just letting it be like a bitch fest. Yeah. Like, we'll take that. So they
boldly took over our space.
They did.
The office space that's kind of dedicated towards...
It's a good space.
It's a communal space. And that is also like the architecture of the way that you build an office space. Can you make it more communal? Can you make it a little more open and inviting to anybody, like sit in on a meeting? Sure.
Yeah. And that was a beautiful moment yesterday. There's some young staff members who are walking into the term executives. It's a big word, but it is. And for them to feel comfortable, I said, this is a huge win that they feel comfortable, that they're not like, can we walk through this door? They just walked. One in particular is kind of leading this cultural push. Sat right in a chair, started spinning around. Like, I love this. And it was like, okay, this is a big sign. If you ask any good owner, if they're a good owner, they're already thinking about tomorrow. I'm not thinking about the moment anymore. 10 years in, cool. Today's that. I'm over here though, worried about tomorrow. And when I see, especially young women in this industry, the craft beer industry or the restaurant industry, feeling comfortable, that means tomorrow is going to be a little more equal and a lot more beneficial to our community, you know? Yep. And so that was a great thing to look at yesterday. And I don't know what was said in that meeting.
Because I was kicking everybody out.
Right.
And now I don't need to know, because that's, again, an in-house professional is going to make sure that this is going to go for tomorrow's future. And that's the secret sauce. That's
absolutely.
Apply it to tomorrow so we can get better.
Yep. And then when they do this meeting, how does that work as far as making it inclusive to everyone, right? Because you've got different locations, you've got different shifts. I mean, for my job is very flexible. I create my schedule. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, I also don't have to stop at a certain time to go be a server.
You're maybe a 7 on the Enneagram scale.
Right?
Yeah. And I would say that this is one of the biggest things that they struggle with, because the people from downtown, they don't want to come to Gilbert. Yeah. But that's where the space is in Gilbert. They're trying to move the times around to sort of capture before, after. But there is no perfect time for a restaurant that's open from 11 to 11. Right. You know, there's no perfect time for that. So they're doing their best, but I would say that is definitely a pain point that they're struggling with.
Well, and one particular young woman who's going to be a leader of the future is now learning all of these things. You can't walk into an office and say, I want to do this, without organizing, without communicating, and having the downtown people go, I'm not included, having the kitchen majority being Hispanic saying, I don't feel included with this white group. You all of a sudden, this young woman now is going to be better for our country's future. And you realize that's what a company can be involved in the community, is helping young people see it differently. And
that's professional development, and personal growth. And that's something that is also part of this. Right?
And hands off, owners, just let it happen. You don't have to be all over this one. And I always call it the fumble theory.
Yeah.
You go into any business that thinks they're great, throw a ball in the middle and see how many people jump on the fumble. And balls flying, proverbially balls flying everywhere because they're trying to grab the fumble. Yeah. Yep. The football is flying everywhere. What you learn is just one person jumps on the fumble, and then it's your ball. And we are seeing that more than ever right now, is it's not just mad rush to fix every problem. And sometimes it's hands-off ownership. Just get out of the way and let this culture kind of, when Maynard from the band Tool, he said, let them build the house, I'll paint the room. That's what people see. But the house has to be built. And all these analogies come in, and it's like, I'm learning my lesson every day of like smiling when I leave that getting kicked out moment from Joe, going, this is so cool that I don't have to do anything. What a special, humbling moment.
But that says a lot for you guys and how you've built this and how you continue to build this and you continue to grow. The very first gentleman we had on the show was Ken Smertz from a company called Zealous. And it's kind of like a graphic design. It's almost construction. So again, another very unique type of culture, right? But he said, sometimes you just have to let the horses run. And maybe there's going to be moments where you let the horses run and then afterwards you go, shit, we learned some things.
Yeah.
Maybe we got to, give one fence to the horses. But like you said, with this one young lady who's leading this, you're now giving her that opportunity to be empowered, to turn into a greater leader and to learn, okay, she's got to figure out the planning, the diversity, the location. There's a lot of these other pieces where, maybe the three of you could step in and be like, hey, just do it at this location, do it at this time, but that's not your place. You got to let her.
That's inauthentic.
Be the guide.
Yeah.
Right. be the guide. That's
Yeah.
what we do now.
Mhm.
And they are now CEOs of their own destiny. Each department has their own, they have to organize everything that happens.
Yeah.
Right. We can help them. We can guide. We can
get the best
curate.
person in that seat so
Right.
that best person, having Ashley as our head brewer is the
Mhm.
best person for that job.
Mhm.
And to have Zach and, Justice, those
Ashley
are
started as a
the
host.
best people.
Did
Yeah.
she?
She came from a 6-figure job and wanted to be in the brewing industry and said, I'll take whatever you got. She guided our customers to their table for a year
Okay.
and then got on our canning line, which is not an easy or fun job at times.
Yeah.
And then became seller, which is, again, think of the term seller.
Mhm.
And then now is our head brewer. And every single step of the way, she's outdone and outproven the last procedures.
Yeah.
We're very lucky to have, you don't do, when you say culture, you can give us credit, but I'm telling you, the only credit I think Pat and I deserve is just being really passionate about getting here.
Mm-hmm.
The culture is Ashley. She's the one who fought through the
Cool.
bad culture
Right.
or the disruptive culture. I don't think we're bad, just disruptive culture.
And learning, right?
Learning
Mhm.
and giving us feedback along the way. And now she's going, okay, you guys say 100-year company, because that's Yvon Chouinard from Patagonia's famous statement. I think it should be slapped on everyone's mind. You should think 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
Is this culture going to last 100 years? And now we can say that. And Ashley can start to understand that when I say I don't like something, I don't mean like right now this sucks. I mean that it won't last for 100 years.
Mm.
So you guys should consider this. And
Mhm.
that's
Right. And her being bought into the mission and the sustainability aspects of,
Yep.
our looming world right now, right? We need to do something, and companies need to take responsibility, extended manufacturer responsibility, like build that into the cost of your goods. And can we treat a business like an ecosystem?
Mm-hmm.
Can it be something that has no waste? Like
Mhm.
in natural environments, there is no waste because there's always mycelium or something that's cleaning up that composted leaf that fell off that tree.
Mm-hmm.
But in human society, we create these piles of waste streams all over. So how do we treat a business like ecology, where it just self-renews itself and recycles
Yeah.
within?
And your employees better be bought into that.
Right.
And that's
And
why
that's
culture matters, because they should also
100%.
care about what you just said. Instead of showing up going, whatever the business says it does this. No, we do this. And when you hear an employee say we, it's a big, big moment.
Huge.
Yeah.
We are saving water.
Mm-hmm.
We save, with the beer that we create, we use the local malt called Sinagua malt.
Mm-hmm.
And Sinagua was started in with the Nature Conservancy in efforts to get farmers to switch away from cotton and corn and alfalfa, which are major water intensive crops.
Okay.
We switch them to growing barley, and then it
Mhm.
gets malted, meaning gets it ready for us to brew or bread to be made. And so that saves about 150 million gallons per year in that range, 120 to 150. In the Verde, how are we going to get employees to buy into that if our culture sucks?
Mm-hmm.
So every time we sell a beer and we hear we save water, a little tear comes out. I know Joe does too, because it's like they just said we are
Mhm.
saving water, and when they're going to move on, there's a good chance that they won't be with us for 100 years. But they're going to go on and say, we still,
Yeah.
we were
Mhm.
saving water. They are amazing. It's just so different when you have buy-in. It's, it's like when Joe is very proud of her child right now, because her child did something amazing in the news recently. And I just realized you can feel that way about your business too. When you stand up for something, and it's like this group of really great, passionate people are using the term we.
Yep. And I will say, from my perspective on all of this, that's why I know you guys will continue to be successful, because it's not just a brewery. It's not just a restaurant. I mean, yeah, I really like your beer and your burgers, but there's more of a why behind it, right? The conservation aspect, and you're building this business that there's purpose behind it. Jon, even when you and I connected the very first time, you were like, okay, you got to talk to this person. You got to talk to this person. It's all local. It's all community. My background is actually in animal behavior and conservation. So I worked in San Diego at the San Diego Zoo for a very long time. So my brain is that conservation background. So that's ingrained in my family. And that's another reason, like, we love you guys and we go there, because there's just more. There's a why and there's a passion behind it. And And I know that's why you guys will continue to do fantastic. And you're going to have more of those moments where your staff says we. And that right there should be like, right? That happy tear is like a check on the box.
Pat and I can speak for Pat on this one. We'll never have the biggest house or the highest house on the mountain. It'll always be with the people, because it just, I think it gives meaning to life when you're with people and you're saying we. It's not meaningful to be looking down on people. And in your business, if you're profit driven for yourself, consider what you could do with those profits. Consider what you could do with your power and influence. You're going to die in a home high up on a hill. And you know, for me, what I'm concerned about is rivers are going to be running dry. And when I say running as a verb, it's happening right now. And we can prove the source that it's coming from. And so do you want to be the person on the high hill looking down on dry riverbeds? No. Go down with the people. Celebrate with them. I would recommend riding your bike to work as much as possible and being part of this activity, you know, and as a business owner, it should be a verb. You're owning. And that's a constant thing happening at all times.
So we're totally running out of time, and I don't even care now. Daryl's going to give me the eyeball because I do want to take just another moment on that topic of the conservation piece, because that is a huge passion piece from my background. I shifted from people or from animals into people, working with animals to working with people. It's all the same thing, right?
Oh, yeah.
We're animals.
Right?
You're wrangling.
Oh,
for sure.
Absolutely. It's all positive reinforcement, communication. We talked about consistency.
Temple Grandin taught me a lot when I watched your documentary.
Right? It's all the same. But I do want to take the last few moments for each one of you. Any last thoughts? And it can be on the culture side, right? If you have one last tip you want to give our listeners on improving culture, or the, you know, ride your bike to work, whatever that conservation tip is that you want to give. I want to give each of you a few moments to just kind of like, what are your last few thoughts, few words? And all of you are looking at
Well, I'll reemphasize owning is a verb.
Yes.
You're not an owner. You're owning. Get a big freaking mirror mentally and look at yourself every day and be owning by owning the problems, owning the successes, sharing, carrying, all the things that are verbs along with owning, that I think it's just so easy to just treat it like it's stagnant water, you know, sitting there in reserve. It's a river. Just be part of it. It's happening around you, and you have this company that you get to decide. There's no final thing, but treat it like the verb that it is and be consistent with it. And the bad days suck. I'll admit it. It sucks. It's not fun to own a company where you're like, I don't want to go in and have that conversation every day for the next 6 months. But if you chip away at it, you will start winning, and you will start to be owning, and you'll love it. And your culture starts with you, owner. You know, it starts with your thoughts. So that's my
That's a good one.
That's my thing. Hashtag owning.
I love it.
So I would say that in HR, we talk about treating similarly situated employees similarly, right? In order to stay compliant, you have to treat all similarly situated employees similarly. But that doesn't mean that you can't treat everybody like a person. And that just because you have 188 employees, that makes it difficult to treat every single person like a person, but not impossible. It's just harder work. So put in the work and make sure we're all treating each other like people.
Like people.
That's
At the end of
right.
the day,
Yeah,
that's all.
it's just people.
We're all humans.
That's all we are. We're just people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I would second that. And at the end of the day, whether you're an owner, an operator, an employee, just breathe. You know, don't worry about it so much. We're in the grand scheme of humanity and existence. This is a tiny speck. So
40 billion years.
Right.
You don't matter the way
we're
you
gonna
think you do.
eventually just all go and suck into black holes and into this
Right.
infinite space. So should we get really concerned over these small moments and enjoy it a little bit, enjoy the ride, enjoy the process? And even if that chopping wood and carrying water isn't the most glamorous thing at every moment, the eventuality of that goal that you're working toward, it's there if you manifest it. And that's whether you're Ashley and you were a hostess to the head brewer, like it's all possible. So I think let's have some openness to, I think the pessimism of the world right now has really constricted a lot of people. So maybe we can flip that script and be a little more open to possibility.
I love that. Owning people as people, take a deep breath. I love all of these. I truly appreciate the three of you for taking time out of your day, first off, but also just for being here and being very genuine and very open about the conversation of culture, that it's a fluffy thing sometimes. You can't really put your finger on it and say, do this, right? Especially in your shoes. You've got the culture of the restaurant, the brewery, culture in general, culture through a pandemic. So I appreciate the three of you just for being genuine. I wish we had more than an hour, but I think Daryl will turn off the microphones at some point because we could stay in here all day. So thank you. On the final note, if somebody is listening and they are either interested in getting involved and getting connected to work with you guys or partner with you guys or learn about culture from you guys, how can they get in touch with one of you?
Yeah,
all of you?
I'm JON@azwbeer.com.
Okay.
I think it's
Johanna at azwbeer.com.
Cool.
And I'm Pat at azwbeer.com.
It's hard to get into that ivory tower, but
We're pretty accessible.
yeah.
You're there.
Yeah.
Awesome.
The group that we work with also, we're definitely not the only three in the office. So we might forward you to our marketing director.
Yeah.
But you get,
At
we
least
have a
that's
Harvard grad COO who's,
awesome.
he's awesome and he's smart. We'll take some questions, but we have the best group I've ever seen in a brewery. I'm speaking humbly here, but we have a really great team. And so if you're listening to this going, how do you get there? Well, it didn't just happen. So we'd be happy to help and lead you and maybe learn something from you. We're always looking to learn something from other companies for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, thank you guys. And thank you everyone for listening. This was another episode of the Culture Crush Business Podcast. We truly believe that people should want to go to work. It shouldn't just be something you do for a very large amount of hours in a day. We really believe that employees and leaders should like where they work. And we think that's possible. And that's what we're trying to showcase here. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Culture Crush, the only podcast out there that does a deep dive of companies that are crushing it with a great company culture. If you think your company has a strong culture that should be highlighted, please reach out to Kendra Maples on LinkedIn or email us at culturecrushpodcast@gmail.com.